The important thing about this trip when they forced their way into Ghana and an African king, King Asa, differed with them and told them, if we saw each other infrequently, maybe we could maintain our friendship. Too much familiarity would erode our friendship. He was beginning to see what could happen. Then, in the beautiful last lines of his speech, he said, the sea is forever pushing against the land, and the land without equal obstinance is forever pushing against the sea. He understood what could happen, but those Portuguese who could not sell him the Bible story forced that gun story on him. They forced their way in and they built Elimia Castle, the first of the great slave force along the coast of Ghana. If 36 of the 42 slave fortresses are in Ghana, this tells you that Ghana was the headquarters of the slave trade. I mention this because there is some evidence to indicate that Christopher Columbus was a part of this expedition. He says in his diary, as a man and boy, I sailed up and down the Guinea coast for 23 years. What was he doing up and down the coast of West Africa for 23 years? He was in the early Portuguese slave trade. This is Christopher Columbus. Now let's go to 1492. In 1492, things happened other than the alleged discovery. That was not a discovery at all. Let's deal with two African events that helped to set certain things in motion. In 1492, Spain was whitened up through the marriage of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. They began now to expel the Moors, the Africans, and the Arabs. If they expelled the Jews, and they did, that means that they did not consider the Jews to be white. Most of the Jews were Sephardic. The same descendants of these Sephardic Jews are second-class citizens in Israel right now, though they are the majority of the population. Not a single field officer in the Israeli army is a Sephardic. Even though they are in the majority in the army is dominated by whites, and the same is true of the Russian army. You've got millions of Asians in Russia. I'm showing you the white face is white, left or right, no matter what they say they believe, religiously or politically. They play the race game. You have over 30 million Muslims in Russia. Russia has declared itself an atheist nation. Christopher Columbus in this early voyage would set a Holocaust for a hemisphere in motion. Expulsion of the Africans and the Arabs from Spain would also set into motion the Inquisition. One of the slickest games in history was when certain Spaniards would tell certain people, especially the grandees, quote, the money managers of Spain, mostly Sephardic Jews, give me your money or go to the gallows. Many Jews converted to Catholicism. They practiced Catholicism by day and Judaism by night. They were called the Marranos, or the Silent Jews. Some of their descendants still live and are practicing both religions. The best known of their descendants is Fidel Castro. There is a good book on this published in France. There hasn't been an English translation about Fidel Castro and his family, tracing his family back to the Maroons. He would go through the motions of being Catholic, even now playing that wise game. This expulsion will do Spain more harm than good because the grandees, who were brought into Spain by the Africans and the Arabs, were doing a pretty good job of managing Spain's money. Spain has never had a strong economic system since they expelled the grandees. They killed the goose that laid the golden egg. I can say across the board, parentheses, maybe with the exceptions of Cuba. Show me a Spanish-speaking country and I will show you a sloppily economically run country any place in the world. Does anybody know a well-run country? They never got themselves together. Another event will happen within inner West Africa, the Western Sudan. The emperor of the Shanghai Empire, Sani Ali, would be killed coming home from a minor war in the south. He drowned when his horse became entangled in an underbrush, crossing a minor stream. Now the great independent states in Africa are beginning to fall. These states are not coastal states. These are inner West African states. These states could have rescued West African states and saved them from the slave trade. They would go on to the heights of grandeur in the midst of the slave trade and in spite of the slave trade. Christopher Columbus in 1492 set out for a new world. Let's ask some questions. This man has no command position. He has not even been a petty officer. How then did this obscure sailor become admiral of the ocean seas for the Spanish Navy? Who is behind this? Why is it that Christopher Columbus sailed from Spain the same week the Spanish expelled the Jews? Who exactly was Christopher Columbus? Was he sailing out ahead of the expulsion? Michael Brady and others have now located those who financed the ships. They were all Jewish bankers who were told, "Give me your money or give me your life." They were the chief translators on the boat. He was to go to Asia. Why didn't he go to Asia? Sailing up and down the Guiana coast, West Africa. He had discovered from African sailors who had already gone to the New World there was a possibility of gold in another direction. I suspect that Columbus turned his ships in another direction. He also discovered that there was a current in the sea. If you pick up a certain time of year, it will push you almost straight into the Caribbean islands. That current took him there. This is why ships were lost coming back, because if you come back too soon, the current reverses itself once every 6 months. That's why he ended up in Portugal on his way back. Once he got there, and you should read Eric Williams' Documents of West Indian History, this is the most underrated Caribbean scholar. Most people underrate him maybe because they didn't like the way he ran Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know how he ran Trinidad. I know he was a damn good researcher, one of the finest of the Caribbean researchers. I knew him at Howard as a professor of political science. He was a brilliant man, and he had a big ego. He was a very brilliant scholar, ego notwithstanding. Documents of West Indian History was only one of the 4 volumes he had compiled. He goes through Christopher Columbus' diary, the best analysis of Christopher Columbus' diary that I ever seen. When Columbus saw these indigenous Americans, parentheses, mistakenly called Indians, he said in his monologue, "I wonder why they're bringing such small amounts of gold. I wonder where their mines are. They'll be easier to conquer than I thought they would be." He would write a letter to Queen Isabella saying, "From this area I can send you as many slaves as you can accommodate." He never thought of partnership. In his mind it was enslavement. From the very beginning, his intentions was not good. He would kill off his own labor supply. He would kill some of the people who could have helped him find the gold. For the documentation on this, I wish someone would read Father Bartolomeo de Las work, The Devastation of the Indies. It's a small book and you could read it in one evening or less. Father de las Casas is called the first historian of the New World. He wrote it all down. Christopher Columbus would go to him after the third voyage and the rapid disappearance of the Indians. He would go and ask for an increase in the African slave trade, allegedly to save the souls of the Indians. When the Pope would send commissions to various islands, sometimes not one Indian would be alive, but the African endured. If the African endured and the Indian perished, it had nothing to do with the fact that one was braver than the other. It had to do with the structure of the societies. The Indians had a monolithic society, and the Africans came out of a pluralistic society, many societies functioning side by side. The Indian came out of a monolithic society which was tightly woven. While they existed side by side with the other societies, they did not give the other societies the same integration or recognition. Sometimes they waged relentless war against the neighboring society. However, now the Algerine is rapidly disappearing. Didas Cass said that from 12 to 25 million people were killed. We're just talking about the Caribbean islands alone. We're not talking about South America, although he alludes to Mexico and South America, but his main concentration is on the Caribbean islands. Christopher Columbus would go from one place to the other. He thought Cuba was Japan. He was sent to the East Indies and would end up in the West Indies. He told his sailors to sign a document that they were in the East Indies, and if they didn't sign, he would cut their tongue out. Ivan Van Sertima has done an informative and concise chapter on this in his book, They Came Before Columbus. When we look at this man and what he has set in motion, he set in motion the increase in the African slave trade. The British had not entered the slave trade at first because the British had some difficulty with the Catholic Church. However, once the British decided to establish a church of their own, and if you're of British extraction and belong to the Church of England, you have to live with the fact that here's a church whose foundation was the hot sexual passion of Henry VIII. If anybody wants to prove otherwise, I him. Henry VIII wanted to cut off one's wife's head and wanted to marry another one. He wanted all these wives. He wanted justification. He wanted the church that would back him up in all his skullduggery, including his thievery, his raid on the church treasury. So he created the kind of church that would give him what he wanted, the Church of England. Throughout his career, he defended the church as so sacred. It was sacred to him because it let him do what he wanted to do. He referred to the church as though it was synonymous with the state. The queen whose head he cut off was the only one that gave him a child that survived. That child was Elizabeth I. Someone called her the alleged Virgin Queen of England. We won't discuss that any further. They showed her a ledger of what could be made in the slave trade after she had refused to go into the business, and finally she went into the business. One of the ships was her personal property, the good ship Jesus, commanded by Captain John Hawkins. British came into the slave trade and made it a business, a dirty business, but a business. They are well-organized gangsters with territory. The British sailed up the Gambia River and took 10 miles on each side. That's the little fast-mile nation that is called the Gambia right now. It was never a viable nation in the true sense. They would spread their slave holding further west. They would push the Portuguese out of the West African slave trade. What about the world Christopher Columbus set in motion? He set in motion Western racism. He set in motion the colonization not only of history, but also the information about history. All of the fight over curricula was set in motion because Christopher Columbus and others set in motion the concept of divine white right, manifest destiny. The assumption that the people of Europe had rights over other people. It set in motion another bogus concept of a chosen people by God. If God chooses one people over another people, then God is a bigot. You cannot say this is also a God of love. God is kind. God is no respecter of kith and kin, and say, God chose me to do something. Then while people are choosing, inasmuch as all chosen people chose themselves, why in the hell don't you choose yourself to be free? Why won't you make a choice and say, we are too proud to live in slums? Why don't you understand what went wrong with the world Christopher Columbus did not discover? Why can't we understand how other people rose from the bottom and recovered what belonged to them?